Hello. First of all, a big thank you to all the coaches that participated in our webinar Sunday night. And also a massive thank you to Todd Beane from Croy Football, who is our guest. And this little video here is a recap of some of the questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. We had a massive turnout on Sunday night, lots and lots of coaches and some more questions that we could get through in the hour. So the idea here is that I'll go through these questions and hopefully we can generate a bit more discussion around them and maybe get some more ideas from our growing community of coaches out there. So the first question comes from Rob, and he asks, in an academy context, do you coach for the player with the lowest ability, or do you push the less able to catch up to the more advanced? So it's a pretty tricky question, and for me there's three parts to it. So the first part involves session design, and I believe it's best to design your session with your best player in mind. So is your best player going to learn something, and are they going to be engaged? I think those are two important questions. Next, within the session, Alan, one of the coaches at the webinar, gave a great answer. So within the session, Alan suggests that we give each player a challenge. But more than that, he says if we can, it'd be great to let them decide or help them choose what the challenge is. So if we've got a player who's excelling and the session's a wee bit too easy for him, then we can give him a challenge, or what some people might call add a constraint. And a good example of this came from Todd Beane, and he talked about a player who had a sock put on his shoe, so that he wasn't supposed to use that foot to dribble, to pass. So he got used to using his weaker foot, which I think is important for all of us. It's actually something that my dad did for me as well when I went to school. But I just used to take the bit of material off my shoe and then play and then put it on at the end of the day, and I was like, oh look, that's clean. So you can get around that. Be aware, players will. And then the third way to view this question is in regard to long-term player development. And Stefan, one of the coaches at the webinar, suggested that the idea could be to break the players' long-term development or their game time over a week into thirds. So a third of the time they should be playing against better players, a third of the time players at the same level, and a third of the time against players that they are better than. So in the last example, when they're the best player, they get to be a bit of a Messi. When they're at the right level, they get challenged. When they're out of their depth, they've really got to step up. So I think this is a good way to think about this question. So the session design, picture the best player. Within the session, can we give players challenges? And then long term, can we look to expose them to different environments whereby sometimes they're the best, and sometimes they're playing against better players. But most of the time, I suppose we want to find that balance, which actually takes us to the next question, which was from Mark, and he asked, in a non-academy setting, would you group players together for training purposes? So I suppose when we talk about grouping players together, to answer this question, I'll say that we're grouping players based on their development or their ability, as some people might say. So the benefits of grouping players together are that it's not too easy then, and it's not outrageously hard. So the session is development appropriate, and really importantly, hopefully anyway, it's challenging. Okay, and when the challenge aligns with the player's ability, they have the possibility of attaining flow, whereby they're kind of so immersed in the game that things start to happen automatically. And this is one of the preconditions for really creative performance across sports and lots of other areas of life like music as well. And then the other benefit of having groups based together like this is that they can learn from each other. So there may be opportunity to get learning within the group. The risk of groups in this way is that it can harm intrinsic motivation. So it then becomes a way of players evaluating each other and their ability, and the whole thing becomes less about the game and playing and more about which group I'm in. So that becomes a problem and a potential risk. Okay, so the final question coming from Angle is, it has been demonstrated that constraining the game can be better than free play to develop creative behavior. What do you think? Okay, so with this one, I think that constraints can be used to direct an athlete's attention towards key information. So let's think about the design of a session. Okay, so we design a session in such a way that we provide opportunities to pass or to dribble, and to do specific passes or do specific dribbles. So what a skilled coach really does is then introduces new opportunities, or what is called in kind of skill acquisition language would be affordances, and then they introduce these new opportunities and guide players towards the use of certain techniques or skills as these opportunities arrive. And that for me is really the skill or the art of coaching, is knowing when to introduce some more information. So we do this progressively, and we can do it as the individual develops. So as they get more skills, they have more options on the ball, more turns and techniques, different types of passes they can use. Or this also can happen as the team's playing style or the system of play develops, because then there's more passes for players to play. There may be opportunities for wall passes, forward runs. So this is another way of progressing that. So I think that's a good way we can think of using constraints and providing or designing an environment that allows athletes to use and see certain opportunities. Okay, that is the end of the questions so far. Please join us on our next webinar. It's coming up soon. All the information will be on our website. Thank you very much.